Do you want to speak English naturally?
My eyes opened at 6 a.m., even before my alarm went off. The excitement of exploring New York City for the first time had kept me tossing and turning all night. I jumped out of bed, got dressed in jeans and a comfortable sweater, and headed downstairs. The hotel was located in Midtown Manhattan, right in the heart of the action. The streets were surprisingly quiet at this hour. A few delivery trucks rumbled past, and I saw some people in business suits rushing to catch early trains. The air was crisp and cool, typical of autumn in New York. I stopped at a small corner deli and ordered what the locals called a classic New York breakfast, a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich on a roll, plus a large coffee. The sandwich was simple but absolutely delicious. With my breakfast in hand, I walked towards Central Park. I had heard so much about this massive green space in the middle of the concrete jungle, and I wanted to experience it during the peaceful morning hours. As I entered the park from the south entrance, I was immediately struck by the contrast. Behind me were towering skyscrapers and busy streets. In front of me were trees, paths, and open grass fields. I walked along the winding paths, listening to birds singing and watching squirrels chase each other up tree trunks. Early morning runners jogged past me, and I saw some people in business suits rushing to catch early trains. The air was crisp and cool, typical of autumn in New York. I stopped at a small corner deli and ordered what the locals called a classic New York breakfast, a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich on a roll, plus a large coffee. The sandwich was simple, but absolutely delicious. With my breakfast in hand, I walked towards Central Park. I had heard so much about this massive green space in the middle of the concrete jungle, and I wanted to experience it during the peaceful morning hours. As I entered the park from the south entrance, I was immediately struck by the contrast. Behind me were towering skyscrapers and busy streets. In front of me were trees, paths, and open grass fields. I walked along the winding paths, listening to birds singing and watching squirrels chase each other up tree trunks. Early morning runners jogged past me, and I saw a few people in business suits rushing to catch early trains. The famous Bow Bridge came into view, its elegant cast iron design reflected perfectly in the still water below. I stood on the bridge for several minutes, taking photos and simply enjoying the tranquility. As I continued walking, I reached Bethesda Terrace and Fountain. The angel statue stood majestically in the center, and even though it was still early, a street musician was setting up his guitar. He started playing a soft melody that echoed beautifully under the arcade. I sat on the steps, closed my eyes, and let the music wash over me. This was the New York I had dreamed about, artistic, peaceful, and magical. By 8 a.m., the park was starting to get busier. Dog walkers filled the paths, children headed to the playground with their parents, and tourists began arriving with their cameras. I decided it was time to move on to my next destination, but I made a mental note to return to Central Park before leaving the city.
My next stop was the iconic Empire State Building. I took the subway, my first time using the famous New York Underground system. The station was crowded and a bit confusing, but a kind stranger helped me figure out which train to take. The subway car was packed with people from all walks of life. Students with backpacks, business people reading newspapers on their phones, and tourists like me, clutching maps and guidebooks. When I emerged from the subway station, there it was, the Empire State Building, rising majestically into the sky. I had seen it in countless movies and photographs, but seeing it in person was completely different. The Art Deco architecture was stunning, with its limestone facade and distinctive shape. I bought a ticket and took the elevator to the 86th floor observation deck. My ears popped as we zoomed upward at incredible speed. When the elevator doors opened and I stepped outside, the view took my breath away. The entire city sprawled out before me in every direction. The grid of streets, the clusters of skyscrapers, the rivers on either side of Manhattan, and in the distance, the Statue of Liberty standing proudly in the harbor. I walked around the entire observation deck, taking in the view from all angles. To the north, I could see Central Park, looking like a perfect green rectangle in the middle of the urban landscape. To the south, the financial district's towers gleamed in the morning sun. A tour guide nearby was explaining the history of the building to a group of visitors, and I lingered to listen. The Empire State Building was completed in 1931 during the Great Depression, he said. It was the tallest building in the world for nearly 40 years. On a clear day like today, you can see up to 80 miles in every direction. After spending about an hour at the top, I took the elevator back down. My next destination was Times Square, just a short walk away. As I approached, I could hear the energy before I could see it. The sounds of traffic, music, and hundreds of voices blending together. Times Square was overwhelming in the best possible way. Giant digital screens covered every building, flashing advertisements, news, and colorful animations. People filled the streets. Tourists taking selfies, street performers entertaining crowds, and costumed characters posing for photos. I stood in the middle of it all, spinning slowly to take in the sensory overload. This was the New York everyone talked about, loud, bright, and full of life.
For lunch, I wanted to try something authentically New York, so I headed to a famous pizzeria in Greenwich Village that had been recommended by my hotel concierge. The neighborhood was completely different from Midtown. Narrow streets lined with brownstone buildings, small boutiques, and cozy cafes. It felt more like a charming European village than part of a massive American city. The pizzeria was small and crowded, with only a few tables and a long line of customers waiting. When my turn came, I ordered a classic New York slice, thin crust, perfectly folded, with just the right amount of cheese and tomato sauce. I ate it standing up, just like the locals, and it was hands down the best pizza I had ever tasted. Simple, but perfect. After lunch, I walked to the 9/11 Memorial and Museum in Lower Manhattan. The mood changed as I approached. The reflecting pools, built in the footprints of the original Twin Towers, were surrounded by white oak trees. Water cascaded down the sides of the pools and disappeared into dark voids at the center. The names of all the victims were engraved in bronze around the edges. I stood there for a long time, reading names and watching other visitors place flowers and flags on the memorial. The atmosphere was somber and respectful. Inside the museum, I walked through exhibits that documented that tragic day. Personal stories, artifacts, photographs, and recordings. It was emotionally overwhelming, but important. By the time I left, I had tears in my eyes, but also a deeper appreciation for the resilience of this city and its people. To lift my spirits, I decided to visit the Brooklyn Bridge. I took the subway to Brooklyn and walked back toward Manhattan across the bridge's pedestrian walkway. The views were spectacular. The Manhattan skyline on one side, the Brooklyn waterfront on the other, and boats moving along the East River below. The bridge itself was a marvel of engineering, with its Gothic arches and intricate cable system. As I walked, I thought about the millions of people who had crossed this bridge over the past 140 years, each with their own story and destination. Street artists were selling paintings and photographs at the Manhattan end, and I bought a small watercolor of the bridge as a souvenir.
As the sun began to set, I made my way back to Times Square and the theater district. Tonight, I had a ticket to see a Broadway show, something I had dreamed about for years. The theater district was buzzing with energy. People in elegant clothes hurried to make their curtain times, and the marquees of famous theaters glowed with bright lights. The theater where my show was playing was beautiful, an ornate interior with red velvet seats, golden decorations, and a magnificent chandelier hanging from the ceiling. I found my seat just as the lights began to dim. For the next 2.5 hours, I was completely transported. The singing, dancing, acting, and stagecraft were absolutely world-class. The talent on display was extraordinary, and I understood why Broadway was considered the pinnacle of live theater. When the show ended and the cast took their bows, the entire audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. I clapped until my hands hurt, grinning from ear to ear. Walking out of the theater into the bright lights of Times Square felt surreal, like waking up from a beautiful dream. I wasn't ready for the day to end, so I decided to have dinner at a classic New York deli. I ordered a pastrami sandwich, a towering creation piled high with tender, flavorful meat. The sandwich was so big I could barely fit it in my mouth, but every bite was delicious. I sat by the window, watching the never-ending stream of people pass by outside. After dinner, I took one last walk through the city. The energy of New York at night was completely different from the morning. Everything seemed to glow. The buildings, the streetlights, the headlights of yellow taxis streaming down the avenues. Street vendors sold hot dogs and pretzels. Musicians played on corners, and the city hummed with life. I walked down Fifth Avenue, past the famous department stores with their elaborate window displays. I strolled through Rockefeller Center, where people were ice skating on the famous rink below the golden Prometheus statue. I stood in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral, admiring its Gothic spires illuminated against the night sky. Finally, around 11 p.m., I returned to my hotel. My feet were sore from walking all day, but my heart was full. I sat on my bed and reviewed the hundreds of photos on my phone. Sunrise in Central Park, the view from the Empire State Building, the memorial pools, the Brooklyn Bridge, and countless street scenes. New York had exceeded all my expectations. It was everything people said it would be and more. Diverse, energetic, inspiring, and unforgettable. The city had a rhythm and personality unlike anywhere else. In just one day, I had barely scratched the surface, but I had fallen completely in love with it. As I drifted off to sleep, the sounds of the city drifted through my window. Sirens in the distance, car horns, and the low rumble of the subway beneath the streets. These sounds, which might have annoyed me in any other city, now felt like a lullaby. They were the sounds of New York, the city that never sleeps, and I knew I would carry this day with me forever.